And that's really why we got up to a multi-year high at the beginning of October. But since then, we've really pulled back. Because of that rise in inventories, we've seen an increase of 22 million barrels over the last 4 weeks, when this time last year we saw a drop of 16 million barrels. So quite a swing there. But also we've seen demand destruction fears kicking in when we've been around $85 for Brent. And then also crude has been swept up in this risk-off appetite as well. So the combination of those three things have eased Brent back below that $80 mark there.
You would say, though, the levels that we reached, $80 for Brent and north of that, that was based on worst-case scenarios for what might happen with Iran, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's pricing in what's going to happen next month. So we are seeing exports starting to drop off there. We're seeing production starting to drop off. But when those sanctions kick in early November, that's really when we'll see those exports really dropping off, because they can only send so much out in terms of their customers going to China and only a few other countries. But also you can only send it on Iran-owned vessels as well because of insurance issues. So that's really going to kick in, and that's why we got ahead of ourselves really in terms of pricing in that fear.
Every issue that you just raised seems like a minor issue relative to an impact if the Saudis were actually to say, we're not going to sell you any more oil because we don't like what you all are doing in response to this.
Right, but that's not likely to happen.
Okay, so the market is discounting that idea at all? Absolutely.
So here in the US, you know, Saudi is the second largest supplier to the US behind Canada. Last month, we saw 1.1 million barrels a day coming into the US from Saudi. That's a 16-month high there.
So when the Crown Prince says that the country will respond effectively in kind or worse if there is some kind of censure or worse by the U.S., what do you think he means?
It's rhetoric in the same way as we've seen from President Trump as well. And so it's that kind of tit for tat that we see.
Is there anything that you think that they would ever do?
If they really wanted to send a signal, they could make it obvious to dial back flows to a certain area. The US would probably be the best place because the US is the largest, most transparent, most timely market. That said, Saudi Arabia, Saudi Aramco, has the largest refinery in the US on the Gulf Coast, Port Arthur, 600,000 barrels a day there, their capacity. And so they're sending a third of their crude to the US here to go to that refinery.
Right.
Yeah. So
did Michael not do as much damage as could have happened at the hurricane? Did prices run up a little on that, or was that was more refining?
That wasn't an issue because Hurricane Michael missed the refinery.
Well, it missed it, but did it run up in anticipation of it and then come back down now that everything's fine, right? None of the...
Right. No, it wasn't really an issue. We saw some production come off in the Gulf of Mexico a little bit. That's pretty much all come back now, so really a non-issue.
Right. I'm just wondering if that's how we went. It was weird to watch it go down below 70 yesterday, when we're listening to these tapes of a bone saw, and you know, put your headphones on, so you know.
But when you have sanctions, though, we've seen it with, say, Russia and Europe, where you have those issues there, but they don't affect the energy flows.
Can I ask you a separate question? Because I know you spend a lot of time thinking about the geopolitical issues, and especially the bone saw and all of the stories that have come out. No, I know. Which is, you know, we've all been awaiting this Aramco IPO, which of course has been delayed, and now there are questions of whether it will even ever happen.
Waiting for Godot, yeah.
Right. But the future of Saudi and its economic plan is very much dependent on that. And the question is how this geopolitical issue, you think, doesn't just affect whether people show up at this conference next week or whatnot, but how you think it affects the country on a very long-term basis. And I'm curious just sort of where you land there.
Well,
I mean, will Aramco ever go public? If they did, what kind of valuation would they get? Would Western investors invest? I mean, do you think all of that is now in question?
There's still, what, 2021 now we're talking about that being, and so there's such a long time before that happens. There's so much to go before now. They have their long-term plan. I think they're going to be sticking to it, but in terms of the IPO or that, I think that's a separate issue to everything else that is going to develop over the next few years.